Elias Thorne did not believe in fences. He believed in boundaries. A fence could be climbed, cut, or ignored. A boundary, once crossed, carried the weight of consequence. His family had held the Ironwood Ranch for 5 generations, spanning 8,000 acres of unforgiving Texas scrubland that met the eastern edge of the sprawling, aggressively sanitized suburbia known as the Silvercrest Heights development. His land was wild. Theirs was manicured and synthetic. And that was the problem. The problem, specifically, was a black, custom-outfitted Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon, license plate reading Fast MD, belonging to Dr. Clara Vance, chief of neurosurgery at the Metropolitan Hospital, whose daily commute sliced 23 minutes off her day if she ignored the 5 miles of paved road and instead used the Ironwoods Access Road, a critical, restricted pathway meant only for heavy machinery and cattle trucks. For 3 months, Elias had played the straight man in a silent, escalating drama. He had installed a heavy-gauge galvanized steel gate. It was cut. He welded a thicker chain. It was broken. He upgraded to a high-tensile, tamper-proof security cable and a military-grade padlock. This morning, he heard the faint, sickening snap of metal breaking before he even saw the dust cloud. Elias was sitting on the weathered porch steps, the early October sun just starting its brutal climb, nursing a coffee that tasted like burnt ambition. The sound was distinct, a sharp, violent punctuation mark in the morning quiet, immediately followed by the guttural rumble of a high-performance engine accelerating over rough terrain. He didn't run. He stood slowly, his body stiff from 70 years of hard labor and recent debilitating worry. He didn't need to look at his watch to know the time. 7:18 a.m. right on schedule. She was never late for her 7:45 a.m. pre-op briefing, which meant she cut through his property like clockwork, treating the very thing that protected his land as a minor, removable inconvenience. He walked past the main farmhouse, moving toward the access road where the 2-track trail met the highway frontage. The G-Wagon, massive and arrogant, was already halfway through the gap where the gate should have been. It looked like a black rhino charging through tall grass, heedless of the damage it caused. Elias stepped directly into the center of the muddy, rutted road. The G-Wagon's high beams, still on from the early morning gloom, hit him like twin spotlights on a stage. Elias didn't flinch. He just stood there, a wide, low obstacle in a worn denim jacket and a dust-caked baseball cap, his stance communicating a finality that the shattered padlock on the ground never could. The vehicle braked abruptly. The specialized, aggressive tires churned the gravel for a second, kicking up a plume of reddish dust that enveloped the space between them. Elias waited for the cloud to settle. A window, tinted to block out the harsh realities of the world, whirred down slowly. Behind the wheel, Dr. Clara Vance was a portrait of focused, high-net-worth impatience. She wore surgical scrubs, expensive ones, still crisp and pristine. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight, her eyes, usually sharp and clinical, narrowed with professional annoyance. She looked at him as if he were a speed bump that had suddenly gained sentience. "Elias," she said, her voice amplified by the expensive car's acoustics, crisp and utterly devoid of warmth. She never used a full greeting, only the obligatory use of his name as a prelude to a demand. "You've got to be kidding me! You replaced the chain again?" Elias didn't move. He kept his hands at his sides. "Morning, Dr. Vance. Yes, I did. I believe that makes 6 times now, in 12 weeks. I'm thinking about installing a landmine next. Might save me the trip." Clara gave a short, sharp sigh, the kind that cost her valuable seconds and communicated vast, sweeping disappointment in his choices. "Look, I have a scheduled craniotomy in an hour. This gate is an absurd obstruction. It connects 2 main roads it has for decades. You know I'm not damaging anything vital. I save over 20 minutes, every single day." "It's not your road, doctor," Elias stated, his voice a low, rough rumble, like stones shifting in a dry riverbed. "It's Ironwood Ranch private access. It's posted, legally secured, and locked. You are trespassing, again." "Trespassing?" She laughed, a brittle, high-pitched sound. "I'm taking a shortcut across a dirt track. It's an easement at best, and I'm a citizen in an emergency profession. I guarantee my contribution to society far outweighs the 5 minutes of inconvenience you suffer replacing a cheap chain. That cheap chain kept 2 of my heifers from wandering onto the highway last month, where they would have been flattened into beef jerky, costing me $15,000 and the lives of 2 animals, Elias countered, his tone hardening. Your shortcut is my property risk. Your convenience is my loss. She pulled off her sunglasses, revealing a flicker of genuine anger. I will write you a check right now for 50 times the cost of your chain, Elias. Just move your truck and let me through. You're harassing me. This has become petty and vindictive. Vindictive? When you drive a $100,000 vehicle and refuse to respect a basic boundary. No, doctor. This is about principle. And today, this is about consequence. Elias reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a worn, tri-folded legal document bound tightly with a rubber band. The sight of the official papers seemed to momentarily short-circuit Clara's practiced aggression. She squinted at the papers. What is that? She demanded. This, Elias said, holding it up, the paper catching the morning light, is why your little shortcut is ending today. You think this road is a simple dirt track? It was, until 6 weeks ago. The tension in the air coiled tighter. The only sound was the G-Wagon's idling engine, a powerful, impatient thrum. Clara gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. She was late, and this man was deliberately blocking her path to the most important day of her professional week. I don't have time for your rancher games, Elias. If you don't move, I'm calling the sheriff and pressing charges for obstruction and emotional distress. You will lose, and it will be expensive. Go ahead and call the sheriff, Elias invited, a dry smile touching the corner of his lips. I've already spoken with him, multiple times. They're aware. He took a step closer to the driver's side window, leaning down so his shadow fell across her face. His eyes, usually squinted against the sun, were clear, steady, and held a cold, absolute certainty that Clara had never encountered in a courtroom or an operating room. The road you're sitting on, Dr. Vance, is no longer just private property access. It's been incorporated into the easement I sold to the City of Midland and the Western Water Authority 6 weeks ago. It runs directly across the proposed route for the new Municipal Water Main 3 Beta, which, by the way, has a diameter of 6 feet and is running a high-voltage conduit along its outer shell. Clara frowned, her annoyance shifting rapidly to confusion. So, it's a utility easement. What does that have to do with me? It has everything to do with you, Elias pressed, his voice dropping slightly, the suspense thick and immediate. The terms of the sale were explicit. Due to the high-voltage component and the environmental liability of any construction interruption, the city declared the entire easement a restricted civil zone. Any unauthorized access is subject to an immediate, automatic, and non-negotiable penalty designed to deter sabotage and industrial trespass. Elias unfolded the document carefully. It wasn't a warning. It was a bill of sale and an appended municipal contract. He pointed a thick, calloused finger at a section highlighted in yellow. When you broke that security cable at 7:18 this morning, you illegally entered a restricted civil zone containing sensitive public infrastructure. The damage you caused to the locking mechanism, minor as it is, triggered a clause in the contract. Clara started shaking her head, trying to dismiss the words, but the gravity in his tone was undeniable. This is ridiculous. You're bluffing. This is a local fine, maybe a couple $100? Elias stepped back, letting her see the entire document. Read the figure, Doctor. The City of Midland's legal department doesn't do fines. They do punitive damages for protecting $300 million in public works. The Ironwood Ranch is contractually required to maintain security, and you violated it. The moment you crossed that threshold, the municipal automated logging system tagged your license plate. He paused, letting the silence hang heavy. The distant sounds of the city, which she was so desperate to reach, were creeping closer. The cost of industrial trespass on a restricted civil zone. Dr. Vance, Elias finally delivered, his voice utterly flat, is a minimum penalty of $2 million. That's what they call the immediate disincentive fee. And since I am the contracted steward of this gate, the city just transferred the entire civil suit responsibility to you, and assigned the enforcement to my legal counsel. Clara's jaw dropped. The professional composure, the haughty arrogance, the surgical precision of her everyday demeanor shattered. $2 million. Not a traffic ticket. Not a check for a chain. A civil lawsuit that would swallow her annual salary and threaten her carefully constructed financial world. The look on her face was not anger, but a pure, unadulterated karmic shock. A total realization that her petty, convenient shortcut had become a financial catastrophe. And to top it off, Doctor, Elias concluded, folding the paper back up and tucking it securely away, I'm standing here blocking your exit. The sheriff whom you The G-Wagon became an expensive armored cage, trapping Dr. Clara Vance not just physically on the muddy access road, but existentially in a moment of pure, blinding catastrophe. The $2 million figure didn't just represent money. It represented the total, immediate collapse of her professional edifice, built on decades of merciless scheduling, impossible precision, and an unshakable belief in her own rightness. Elias's words, "You are officially parked on a $2 million mistake," reverberated in the silence, sharper than any sonic boom. She didn't scream or cry. Her emotional response was far more terrifying, a total clinical shutdown followed by the activation of pure predatory survival instinct. Neurosurgery had trained her for this. For the moment the unexpected complication arises on the table. You don't panic. You isolate the anomaly and you eliminate it. Elias Thorne was now the anomaly. She snatched her phone from the center console, her hands shaking so violently she almost dropped the diamond-encrusted device. She mashed the hands-free button. "Office! Get me Dr. Sterling, now, I'm held up." Her voice was tight. A wire pulled taut. A moment later, the cool, collected voice of her executive assistant, Meredith, came through the speakers. "Dr. Sterling is in pre-op, doctor. They need you now. Dr. Chen is already scrubbing in. Tell Sterling I'm stuck, detained. Tell him to handle the consent forms. I'll be there in 20. Do not start the induction without me." "Doctor, the patient is on the table. They started induction 7 minutes ago. Clara slammed the phone down onto the console, cutting Meredith off mid-sentence. The craniotomy, the life-or-death, career-defining surgery she had rushed through a private, secured road to reach. She was going to be late. That was bad. But the reason she was late, a $2 million lawsuit for criminal-adjacent industrial trespass, was career suicide. A battered, dust-covered sheriff's vehicle, a white Ford Expedition with faded blue striping, pulled into view from the highway frontage road. It braked 20 feet behind Clara's G-Wagon, strategically blocking any attempt she might make to reverse onto the main road. The driver, Deputy Chet Riley, a man who knew Elias Thorne better than he knew his own children, unfolded his lanky frame from the vehicle. Chet approached Elias first, nodding grimly. "Morning, Elias. Looks like you caught the mouse." "The trap was sprung, Chet," Elias replied, watching Clara through the windshield. Her profile was rigid, a mask of fury. "She broke the seal at 7:18 a.m. I didn't touch her. Just stood here and waited." Chet adjusted his mirrored sunglasses and approached the driver's side of the G-Wagon. Clara lowered the window just enough to speak, her face still flushed with contained anger. "Deputy Riley, I am Dr. Clara Vance, and I am being unlawfully detained by this man on a public access road. I have a medical emergency, a life-saving surgery, and he is refusing to move. I demand you clear the road and issue him a citation for obstruction." Chet didn't react to her titles or demands. He pulled a folded official packet from his breast pocket. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this road has been designated a restricted civil zone for water authority infrastructure since September 1st. It's posted legally. Mr. Thorne is the contracted security representative for the city, here to document the breach." He held the packet out to her. "This is a civil summons from the City of Midland and the Western Water Authority, filed against you, Clara Vance, for willful industrial trespass and consequential damages. You are officially served." Clara didn't take the documents. "This is a farce." "I'll have my lawyers contact the city's council. This is an attempt at extortion, and I will countersue for harassment and emotional damages that will bankrupt this ranch." Chet shrugged, dropping the papers onto the custom-fitted black rubber floor mat of the G-Wagon. The sound of the papers hitting the floor was the sound of her life hitting a wall. "That's your right, Doctor. My job here is done. You are no longer being detained by Mr. Thorne. You are merely immobilized by your own decision to break the law and the fact that there's a 6-foot-wide steel pipe being buried 20 feet beneath your tires," he paused, looking pointedly at the clock on his dashboard. "But as a courtesy, Doctor, you should know that the city's council has also filed an injunction against your vehicle, citing it as evidence of the damage. You can move it, but it has to be towed. You can't drive it off this property under its own power until the inspection is done." He tipped his hat to Elias, then climbed back into his cruiser, leaving Clara alone in her massive, beautiful, and utterly useless vehicle, surrounded by dust, dirt, and the crushing weight of legal consequence. Clara called her attorney, Julian Reese. From the passenger seat of an Uber, she eventually had to summon to pick her up on the highway shoulder. She missed the craniotomy. Dr. Sterling, a younger, aggressively ambitious surgeon who had long coveted Clara's position, performed the operation flawlessly. When she finally walked into the hospital at 9:45 a.m., the operating room was already cleaned, the patient was in recovery, and the atmosphere was thick with the scent of professional betrayal. Julian Reese was a corporate shark, not a small claims lawyer. He was furious. "Clara, this is not a parking ticket. This is a municipal action with a punitive multiplier attached. The moment you broke the lock on a restricted civil zone gate, you lost all credibility. The contract is ironclad. Elias Thorne set a sophisticated trap, and you walked right into it. I need you to shred the contract and shred the rancher," Clara hissed, pacing the plush carpet of her office. Her scrubs felt like a straitjacket. "Find the loophole. Find the leverage. $2 million is an insult, and the thought of that dirty old man winning makes my stomach turn. The only loophole is attacking the enforcement," Julian advised, his voice measured. "We can argue the $2 million penalty is disproportionate and excessive under Texas Civil Code. But to do that, we need to prove Elias Thorne lacked the authority to contract with the city, or that the contract jeopardizes his own financial stability, making the whole agreement fraudulent." Clara stopped pacing. That was the first thread of hope. She knew nothing about Elias Thorne except that he was an annoying, principled fossil. "Dig into his financial history, Julian. Every lien, every loan, every tax record for Ironwood Ranch for the last 10 years. I want to know where the money for that easement sale went. That kind of land sale means he was desperate, or in debt, or both." "That's going to be expensive, Clara. It's a fishing expedition." "I earn $1 million a year, Julian. I will spend $2 million to win this principle. Do it. Find the pressure point. I want that rancher to feel the same existential panic I felt this morning multiplied by 10. 2 days later, the fallout at Metropolitan Hospital was seismic. Clara's reputation, once flawless, was now stained. Missing the scheduled craniotomy was bad enough. The whispered rumors of a multi-million-dollar lawsuit involving industrial sabotage were worse. Sterling was already positioning himself to take her department head role, emphasizing his reliability and commitment, traits Clara had just publicly discarded. Julian called with the first piece of actionable intelligence. "Ironwood Ranch is not just fine, Clara. They are catastrophically leveraged. Elias's wife, Sarah, has been battling stage 4 pancreatic cancer for 3 years. The cost of treatment, the specialists, the experimental drugs, it's immense. He took out an equity loan against the ranch 3 years ago just to keep the treatments going." Clara leaned back in her chair, a slow, cold smile spreading across her face. This wasn't about principle anymore. This was a surgical strike. "The land sale to the city," Julian continued, "the one that created the restricted civil zone, that money wasn't profit. It was to pay off the final crippling equity balloon payment, which was due next month. If he hadn't sold that easement, the bank would have foreclosed. So, the Ironwood Ranch is financially stable only if that sale is finalized and the easement is secure," Clara summarized, her mind already working 3 steps ahead. "And the sale is contingent on the buyer, the city, receiving an unencumbered property boundary, correct?" "Exactly. And the city's contract explicitly states that any breach of security that results in a major civil action, like, say, a $2 million suit where the defendant is contesting the restricted zone designation, could allow the city to place the easement funds in escrow until the dispute is settled." Clara closed her eyes, visualizing the geometry of the situation. Elias had built a trap to secure his financial stability, and she was about to use the trap itself as the weapon to destroy him. "Julian," she instructed, her voice calm and chilling, "do not argue the $2 million penalty. Accept the summons, but immediately file a countersuit, a massive one. Target Elias Thorne personally, the Ironwood Ranch, and the city of Midland itself. The suit must focus on claiming that the restricted civil zone designation is illegitimate, poorly marked, and constitutes an illegal seizure of private, necessary access." Julian was confused, but that argument validates the original $2 million penalty if we lose. "We're not trying to win that case, Julian. We're trying to create enough legal instability to freeze the funds from the easement sale. If those funds are frozen, Elias can't pay his loan balloon payment next month. The bank forecloses. He loses the ranch, and his wife loses her medical coverage." Clara opened her eyes. The emotion was gone, replaced by the grim resolve of a predator. "I want him." The ringing in Elias's ears was louder than the dial tone Julian Reese had cut short. The $4.5 million escrow wasn't just a number. It was Sarah's next 3 months of specialist care and the final shield against the bank. Now it was locked away, hostage to a spiteful neurosurgeon. Elias walked through the ranch house, every step on the creaking floorboards amplifying the sickening feeling of failure. He found Sarah in the sunroom, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the pecan grove. She was frail, her skin paper-thin, but her eyes, the clear, strong blue that had anchored him for 40 years, were as sharp as ever. "That was Julian Reese," Elias said, standing in the doorway, unable to meet her gaze. His voice was thick with unspent terror. Sarah looked at him, recognizing the shadow of disaster in his posture. "No, it wasn't. Julian doesn't call the landline. That was the other one." Her lawyer. "What did the doctor do now, Elias?" He sat beside her, taking her thin, warm hand. He told her everything, leaving nothing out. The trap he set with the restricted civil zone, the initial victory of the $2 million fine, and Clara's colossal, targeted countermove, the $35 million countersuit that froze the easement funds and triggered the foreclosure countdown. Sarah listened without interrupting. When he finished, the silence was heavy, broken only by the dry, restless wind outside. "You played checkers, Elias," she said finally, her voice steady despite the weariness it carried. "And she played nuclear war. I didn't know she was this ruthless. I didn't know it would affect the sale agreement like this. I was trying to protect what little we had left," Elias confessed, his voice cracking. He was not used to begging, least of all for forgiveness from the one person who trusted him completely. Sarah squeezed his hand. "I know you did. But our equity loan, Elias, it was always due next month. That money was already earmarked for the balloon payment, wasn't it?" He nodded miserably. "It was the only way to pay it off. Now we have 30 days until the bank starts proceedings. And without the insurance that land sale funded, the next cycle of chemo—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek, but when she opened them, the blue had hardened. It wasn't surrender. It was battle. "Then we don't have 30 days. We have 2 weeks until the next treatment is scheduled. That is our deadline. We fight the bank, the city, and that vicious woman. Where do we start?" Elias started where he thought he had the most leverage, the city of Midland. He drove into the gleaming glass and steel heart of downtown, feeling like a dust mote caught in a hurricane. He was ushered into the office of Howard Fisk, the city attorney who had drafted the Ironwood easement, the man who owed Elias for the rapid, quiet deal that launched his major water project. "Howard, you have to unfreeze that money," Elias pleaded, leaning over the polished mahogany desk. "The contract clearly states I maintained the boundary and I even caught the trespasser. Her lawsuit against the city is frivolous. You know that." Fisk, a man in a tailor-made suit who looked perpetually startled, wrung his hands. "Elias, I understand, but look at the risk. $35 million. Dr. Vance's lawyer, Reese, is a predator. If we release the funds now and she wins any part of her claim that the restricted civil zone was improperly established, we are liable. Our legal team advised immediate escrow." "So you're letting her destroy a family to avoid a legal headache?" Elias demanded. Fisk dropped his gaze. We have a $300 million bond project to protect, Elias. The priority is ensuring the water main installation proceeds without delay. If Vance's suit drags on for a year, the funds stay frozen for a year. You need to settle with her. Make the $2 million penalty disappear, and maybe she'll drop the countersuit. Elias stood back, a cold, terrible clarity settling over him. He was expendable. The city had used him and now discarded him. She's not going to settle, Howard. She wants the ranch. She's doing this to bankrupt me, and she's succeeding. Then you need real help, Elias. Better than a small-town lawyer. Elias left City Hall with the suffocating realization that the institution he thought was his ally was now just another wall. His only recourse was the law, a system built to favor the well-funded. Meanwhile, in her high-rise office suite, Dr. Clara Vance was meeting with Julian Reese, her face illuminated by the reflected light of the city below. She was wearing her street clothes, an impeccable white power suit, having taken the day off from surgery to orchestrate the kill. Have you secured the debt note, Julian? She asked, not a question, but an order. Julian smiled, a rare, cold expression of victory. The regional bank branch was happy to get rid of it. They saw the public lawsuit, the frozen city funds, and the imminent default. They sold the equity loan to a holding company we established this morning for 60 cents on the dollar. Clara steepled her fingers. Excellent. I now control his debt. This is elegant, Julian. When the balloon payment defaults in 2 weeks, we don't need the court to settle the original trespass case. We, as the note holder, simply initiate foreclosure proceedings. We get the ranch, clear the easement for the city, and the whole problem is solved. Elias Thorne is gone. It's flawless, Clara. The city attorney is terrified. Thorne has nowhere to run. He'll lose everything. His land, his legacy, and with the foreclosure, likely his wife's insurance plan will be impossible to maintain. Good, Clara said, standing up and walking to the window. He thought a cheap padlock could defeat me. He will learn that a principle without power is merely a plea. Now, Julian, there is one last thing. I want that impounded G-Wagon returned immediately. The police inspection is over. I need my vehicle. It's evidence of nothing but a broken chain. It's a minor nuisance, but it's still legally impounded by the city until the original trespass suit is fully discharged, Julian explained. You accepted the summons. It's tied up as evidence in the $2 million case, specifically the one Thorne filed. Clara spun around, her eyes flashing. Unacceptable. I want that G-Wagon back by tomorrow morning. I need the control. Put pressure on the police department. Threaten another suit against the sheriff's office for illegal seizure. I don't care how, Julian. Get my vehicle. Elias met with his old friend and lawyer, Dale Jenkins, in a cluttered, dusty office above the town's only dry cleaner. Dale was good for wills and property disputes, but this was high-stakes corporate warfare. Clara Vance is trying to buy your debt, Elias, Dale said, his face pale as he reviewed the foreclosure documents. If she gets that note, she can push foreclosure faster than the bank ever would. We need to file an emergency injunction against the city to release the funds, arguing necessity for life-saving medical care. Can we win? Elias asked. We can slow it down, Dale admitted grimly. But freezing the city's $4.5 million in escrow is legal under the contract's dispute clause. We don't have a smoking gun to unfreeze it. We only have desperation. Elias sighed, running his hand over his tired face. Desperation wasn't enough. He had 2 weeks. He needed an angle, a way to hit Clara where she lived. Tell me about the G-Wagon, Elias said, a strange idea forming in his mind. Where is it? Still impounded at the sheriff's annex. It's evidence in the city's $2 million trespass suit against her. And what was the specific charge? Willful industrial trespass and property damage, the lock, the chain, the gate structure. The city cited the damage to the mechanism. Elias leaned back, his eyes narrowing. He remembered the moment. The dust cloud, the brief flash of the massive black vehicle. She didn't damage the gate structure, Dale. She cut the security cable and she broke the padlock. The ironwood gate itself, that the cable was attached to, was fine. The city's original claim was about damage to the restricted zone access point. So her car is impounded as evidence of property damage to the access point. But if I check the vehicle, I saw the G-Wagon hit the ground hard when she braked. She was moving fast before she saw me. She thought she had the right of way. That night, Elias drove out to the sheriff's remote fenced annex. He was not there to trespass, but to inspect property relevant to a lawsuit he was party to. Deputy Chet Riley met him at the chain-link gate, looking sympathetic but professional. "I need to inspect the damage to the evidence vehicle, Chet. Part of my counter-defense in the $35 million suit. I need to document the state of her vehicle after the trespass," Elias explained. Chet looked uncomfortable. "Elias, I can't let you do a full inspection." "I don't need to," Elias interrupted, pulling out a simple, old-fashioned flashlight. "I just need a walk around. I'm looking for physical evidence of her intent to cause damage to the road itself, not the lock." "I saw her hit a rut hard," Chet eventually acquiesced, guiding Elias into the brightly floodlit yard where the massive black G-Wagon sat, covered in a thin film of reddish dust. Elias walked around it slowly, shining the light low to the ground. He examined the specialized, heavy-duty tires, the kind designed for off-roading but only ever used on Silver Crest's paved roads. And then he saw it. It wasn't damage to the body. It was an anomaly beneath the front wheel well. Tucked into the undercarriage, near the axle of the front driver's side, was a tiny, glinting piece of metal. It was a section of wire, less than 4 inches long, no thicker than a pencil lead, twisted and bent. It didn't look like part of the security chain or the padlock. It was too delicate. Elias gently used a twig. The small braided wire, no longer than Elias's thumb, felt like a live fuse in his hand. He hadn't just found evidence of petty trespass. He had unearthed the sophisticated, deliberate act of sabotage against a federally secured public works project. This wasn't a civil tort. It was a criminal offense that could cost Dr. Clara Vance everything: her freedom, her reputation, and the 7-figure medical license she had spent 2 decades earning. The next morning, Elias drove straight to Dale Jenkins's office. Dale, already frazzled by the complexity of fighting a $35 million suit, took one look at the wire and instantly paled. "Elias, what is this?" Dale whispered, examining the microscopic fragment under his desk lamp. "It's the reason she knew exactly where to cut the cable, Dale," Elias explained, his voice low and firm. "When the city designated the restricted zone, I had a pressure-sensitive, electronically logged trigger installed beneath the gate. It wasn't visible. It sends a silent coded signal to the Water Authority's central monitoring office the second the gate is moved or tampered with. It's what tagged her license plate. This wire is from a jammer or a sensor bypass. It confirms premeditation, not just impulse. She tried to blind the monitoring system before she hit the gate. Dale immediately recognized the gravity. Premeditated industrial sabotage of a restricted civil zone. That's federal territory, Elias. The city attorney, Fisk, will panic. If this goes public, the Water Authority and the city face a massive internal security review. They'll be implicated for negligence. They won't want this investigated by the FBI? Exactly, Elias agreed, leaning forward. Clara thought she was only fighting me. She didn't realize she was fighting the bureaucracy, and she left evidence of a serious crime inside her impounded vehicle. We don't threaten her. We threaten them. We use this wire to force the city's hand. Elias and Dale immediately requested an emergency meeting with Howard Fisk, the city attorney, bypassing all his legal screens. Fisk, hearing the urgency and the word sabotage, agreed to meet in an unmarked municipal conference room within the hour. Fisk arrived looking like a man who had just swallowed glass, his polished demeanor shredded by the ongoing $35 million countersuit. What is so urgent, Elias? I told you the escrow is legally frozen. Your only option is to settle with Vance. Elias didn't waste time on pleasantries. He pushed the tiny wire fragment across the sterile conference table directly into Fisk's line of sight. This piece of metal was recovered from Dr. Vance's G-Wagon while it was impounded as evidence. It's a fragment of an electronic bypass device. Dr. Vance didn't just break a lock. She attempted to jam or disable the restricted zone security sensor before she trespassed. That's premeditated industrial sabotage on a major public works project. That is a felony, not a civil dispute. Fisk's composure evaporated. His eyes darted from the wire to Elias, then frantically back to the door, as if expecting the FBI to materialize. If this evidence goes to the county sheriff, Fisk, it becomes a criminal investigation. If the FBI gets involved, every detail of the easement sale, the security protocols, and your office's failure to inspect the vehicle thoroughly will be scrutinized. Elias pressed, his voice cold. Your $300 million bond issue will be halted, your career will be over, and the city will be facing federal negligence charges for allowing industrial sabotage on a high-voltage conduit. Fisk was breathing shallowly. What do you want, Elias? I want the city to use its contractual authority, citing an imminent threat to public safety due to proven malicious intent by the defendant, to immediately and unilaterally release the $4.5 million easement funds from escrow, Elias demanded. I want that money wired to my account by end of business today, no conditions. Do that, and this piece of wire goes to my lawyer's safe. And the only thing we pursue against Clara Vance is the original $2 million civil fine. Fisk swallowed hard. The risk of the felony wire going public was infinitely worse than the risk of releasing the escrow. He had to save the city's bond and his own career. Done, Fisk gasped, already reaching for his phone to call the city treasurer and legal department. But Elias, you have to meet with Vance. You have to settle that $35 million countersuit and that $2 million fine, or she'll keep suing and we'll be back here again. An hour later, Elias was sitting in Julian Reese's opulent law office. Reese, clearly under instruction from Clara, had arranged an immediate lawyer-to-client settlement conference. Clara Vance swept into the room, wearing a tailored navy suit, her face a mask of controlled fury. She still believed she held all the cards. The debt note was hers. The ranch was weeks from foreclosure. And Elias was a defeated man. This is an unnecessary distraction. Mr. Thorne, Clara stated, not offering a greeting or a handshake. You are wasting my time and my money. I'm here to offer you a final deal. Drop the original $2 million trespass fine, and I will reduce my $35 million countersuit to a nuisance settlement of $50,000. It's enough to cover my legal fees and humiliation. Accept or face complete ruin. Elias simply laid a sealed, official envelope on the table. It was embossed with the seal of the city treasurer. Before we discuss your terms, Dr. Vance, I think you should check your email, Elias suggested calmly. Clara shot a look at Reese, who pulled out his phone. His eyes widened slightly as he read the screen. Clara, the city just released the Ironwood Ranch easement funds. All $4.5 million. It's officially out of escrow and in Thorne's operating account, Reese reported, his voice tight with confusion. Clara's face went white. This was impossible. This was her leverage. Why? On what grounds? That's illegal. On the grounds of protecting public safety from an imminent threat, Elias stated, leaning back, the picture of quiet confidence. You see, Dr. Vance, you missed one thing when you installed that bypass equipment on your G-Wagon. You escalated your trespass from a property dispute to a felony crime against state infrastructure. He placed the tiny braided wire on the table, pushing it toward her. It was the only time she flinched. The look on her face was pure, visceral terror, the fear of a high achiever facing absolute, irrevocable disgrace. I have recovered this from the impounded G-Wagon, Elias said, his voice now a low, predatory purr. I shared my findings with the city attorney, who immediately recognized the threat of a federal investigation. They released the escrow money not because they like me, but because they are terrified of what this wire proves you did. They would rather pay me and silence the scandal than let the FBI investigate industrial sabotage on their watch. Julian Reese was already on his feet, reaching for the wire. Elias, give me that. That's illegally obtained evidence. It's evidence obtained during an inspection of property relevant to a civil suit I'm party to, counsel, Elias corrected, tapping the wire with his finger. I haven't filed a criminal complaint yet, but if you don't drop your entire $35 million countersuit, if you don't personally guarantee the city's immediate withdrawal from your legal team, and if you don't formally discharge the $2 million original fine, this wire goes to the U.S. Attorney's Office within the hour. You lose your license, your hospital privileges, and you face prison time for economic terrorism. Clara didn't look at the wire. She looked at Elias, the hatred in her eyes absolute, but finally mixed with defeat. She had met a force more immovable than herself, principle armed with documentation. "Julian," she commanded, her voice barely a whisper. "Drop the suit." "All of it! Now!" Reese, recognizing the end of the line, nodded stiffly and began drafting the mutual withdrawal documents. Within 20 minutes, the $35 million threat vanished. The $2 million fine was voided, and Elias had $4.5 million in his bank account. He had saved the ranch and Sarah's treatment. Elias stood up, pocketing the wire and looking down at Clara, who was now staring blankly at the mahogany table. "You won, Mr. Thorne," she hissed without looking up. "No, Doctor," Elias corrected. "We survived. You tried to use my wife's health against me. You lost the moral high ground, and you almost lost your freedom. You think that's the end of it?" Clara finally looked up, a cold, empty smile returning to her lips. She didn't look defeated. She looked like a chess player who had sacrificed a rook to capture the queen. "I may have dropped the suits and released the escrow, Elias," she said, her voice dripping with cruel finality. "But you forgot one thing, the debt note. I told Julian to buy it, but I didn't tell you what I did with it next. You paid off the equity loan, but you didn't check the current holder of the debt." Elias paused at the door, the victory momentarily tasting like ash. "When Julian acquired your debt note 2 days ago, he immediately sold it to a separate, legitimate third-party investment firm, a massive, aggressive development company called Atlas Capital. I didn't want the paperwork of foreclosure. I wanted to outsource the execution." She gave a short, hard laugh. "Atlas Capital owns your debt, Elias. They are notorious for predatory foreclosures and zero-tolerance policies. Your $4.5 million covers the balloon payment, but I had them add a technical, non-curable clause to the debt instrument during the resale, a clause you are already in breach of. They are moving to foreclose not for lack of funds, but for breach of contract compliance that I engineered 2 days ago. They don't want your money, Elias. They want the land for a new multi-thousand-unit suburban development. And they will have it. I saved my—" The $4.5 million sat secure in Elias's account, yet it felt like monopoly money in the face of the existential dread Atlas Capital represented. Elias and Dale Jenkins spent the night poring over the revised debt instrument that Clara Vance's lawyer, Julian Reese, had masterfully crafted and attached to the note before selling it to the development firm. "She's wicked." "Elias, genuinely wicked," Dale muttered, rubbing his eyes raw in the dim light of the ranch office. "Look at this technical compliance rider, Section 3, subsection B. It's non-standard. It states that any party assuming ownership of the note demands that the debtor immediately provide certified documentation that the entire perimeter of the mortgaged property is secured by standard, fire-retardant barbed wire fencing meeting County Ordinance 4A, and that a professional surveyor's report confirming the fence line is filed within 72 hours of the note transfer." Elias stared at the fine print, the betrayal sinking deeper than any debt. 72 hours? She knew that Atlas Capital took possession 2 days ago. It takes a week to schedule a surveyor in this county, and half the ranch perimeter is fenced with ancient cedar posts, the kind Sarah's grandfather put up. It's not fire-retardant standard. It's the oldest trick in predatory finance, engineering an immediate, non-curable default. Exactly. You have the cash to pay the whole loan off today, but Atlas Capital can legally refuse your payment because you are technically in default due to a minor deliberate compliance issue. They don't want the money. They want the land. And according to this note, their legal right to foreclose based on this technicality matures in 24 hours. Sarah walked in, her face drawn but her spirit unbroken. She saw the despair in their eyes. "So the money that saved my life is useless to save the ranch?" "It gives us 1 day of leverage, Sarah," Elias said, standing up. He looked at the sealed envelope containing the braided wire, his last terrible ace. Clara outsourced the execution, but she didn't eliminate the collateral damage. She created a felony against herself and a massive regulatory headache for the city. We go back to Howard Fisk. We force him to fight our new enemy. At noon, Elias and Dale were back in Fisk's municipal conference room, this time with a formal state-level criminal complaint ready to file, complete with the physical evidence. Fisk, already drowning in the fallout from the released escrow funds, looked haggard. "You're telling me that even though you have the funds, Atlas Capital, this multi-billion-dollar firm, is moving to seize the Ironwood Ranch on a fencing technicality that Vance created?" Fisk asked, running his hands through his thinning hair. "Vance is gone, Fisk. Atlas Capital is the enemy now," Elias stated flatly. "They don't just want my land. They want the 10,000 acres surrounding it. They will pave over everything, and the entire environmental stability and water table of your new restricted civil zone will be compromised by suburban runoff." Elias tapped the criminal complaint. "You remember this? The premeditated industrial sabotage? If I file this, the state police, the DA, and eventually the FBI get involved. The wire comes out. The scandal hits the news. The public hears that the city's entire water easement project is compromised because a wealthy neurosurgeon committed a felony on the access road, and your office covered it up to save a bond issue." Fisk's eyes darted around the room. "What is the proposal, Elias?" "I am out of contractual tools. You have regulatory tools. You need to use the city's water authority and zoning commission to declare the Ironwood Ranch land, and specifically the area Atlas Capital wants to develop, a critical environmental overlay zone based on the proximity to the new main conduit and the necessity for stability," Elias demanded. "Declare an immediate moratorium on any new development permits in that entire section of the county for 12 months, citing the recent security breach as proof of vulnerability." A moratorium. That would freeze Atlas's development plans for a year. That's hundreds of millions in delay. Fisk breathed. "If Atlas can't develop the land, they can't make a profit," Elias concluded. "They will be holding a piece of useless debt with zero payoff. They won't foreclose. They will dump the note just to recover their principal and cut their losses. You save your bond issue and you save the Ironwood Ranch. Fail to do this and I file the criminal complaint and we both burn." Fisk knew he was trapped. A temporary development moratorium was painful, but a federal industrial sabotage investigation was catastrophic. He called the mayor's office immediately. That evening, the skies over Ironwood Ranch were the color of bruised plums. The air was heavy, but the tension inside the house was heavier. They were waiting for one of two things: the certified letter from Atlas Capital initiating foreclosure, or the phone call confirming the development moratorium. The phone rang at 7 p.m. It was Dale Jenkins. Elias, it worked. The city council convened an emergency session. They declared a 12-month moratorium on all new development permits for a 2-mile radius around the restricted civil zone, effective immediately. They cited unforeseen environmental and security vulnerabilities related to the recent publicly known trespass incident. Elias leaned against the counter, closing his eyes in exhausted relief. "And Atlas?" Atlas Capital's lawyers were livid. They called Fisk's office screaming, "But the moratorium makes the land worthless to them for a year. They don't have time to fight the city's zoning laws. They have deadlines. They have already called Julian Reese, wanting to know why he sold them a radioactive asset. So they'll sell the note? They've already sold it. Atlas doesn't waste time. They dumped the note to a holding company for a fraction of its value, just to clear it from their books. I have tracked the buyer. We can buy it back for pennies on the dollar and discharge the technical default ourselves, effectively zeroing out your original loan debt." Elias hung up the phone and walked into the sunroom where Sarah was sitting. He didn't have to say a word. The air had cleared. The shadow was gone. "We won, Sarah," he said, his voice husky. "The ranch is safe. The debt is gone." Sarah smiled, a genuine, joyful expression that had been missing for weeks. "Then let's start that next round of treatment." The final, devastating twist of karma arrived for Clara Vance not via the courts, but via the hospital's executive floor. She had spent the day performing a routine appendectomy, trying to reestablish the rigid control over her world that the rancher had shattered. She was furious that Atlas Capital had lost interest. She had wanted Elias to suffer foreclosure, not just a scare. She was still obsessed with the revenge she had paid millions for. When she returned to her office, Dr. Sterling, the younger, ambitious surgeon, was sitting in her plush leather chair waiting. He wasn't smiling. "Sterling, this is my office. Get out!" she snapped, dropping her briefcase. Sterling slowly rose, holding a manila envelope. I'm afraid not, Clara. Effective immediately. The Board of Governors has requested your temporary leave of absence, pending a full ethics review and investigation. Clara felt a cold wave wash over her. Ethics review? For what? Missing a surgery weeks ago? No, Clara, for the felony investigation, Sterling said, his eyes cold and clinical. The county sheriff's office just delivered a packet to the hospital CEO detailing a criminal complaint alleging industrial sabotage of state infrastructure during the September 1st incident. It includes an official affidavit from Elias Thorne detailing the electronic bypass wire recovered from your vehicle. The complaint names you specifically. Clara stumbled back against the desk. Elias had filed the complaint after all. That's a scare tactic. That's intimidation. I settled those civil suits, she stammered, scrambling for control. The civil suits are gone, but the criminal evidence remains, Clara. The police report is now public record. The board cannot afford the liability of having a department head under criminal investigation for sabotage and economic terrorism. I have been appointed interim chief of neurosurgery. Sterling placed the envelope, her termination paperwork, on the desk where she usually signed off on life-saving operations. The greatest irony, Clara, Sterling finished, adjusting his expensive cufflinks, is that you were willing to risk everything for a 6-minute shortcut. And now, the institution you devoted your life to has taken the quickest route to sever ties with you. Clara Vance stared at the envelope, the sterile institutional language of her downfall confirming her total loss. She had survived the cancer scare, beaten the insurance companies, and intimidated city officials. But she could not defeat the law of unintended consequences. Her impatience, her arrogance, and her absolute conviction that her time was more valuable than Elias Thorne's property had led her down the shortest path to her own professional ruin. The shortcut she took did not just stop her cold. It stripped her of the only thing she truly valued, her prestige.